What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Carson Wagner Show. I'm Carson Wagner. Today, we're going to be tackling some of the most disturbing big stories that hit the headlines last week and this week. Lots of stuff going on, and I wasn't able to cover any of it because I've been sick for a while. But I'm better now. I have my voice back. I'm able to talk for the most part without coughing my brains out. So we're good to go on that side of things. And a lot of stuff happened when I wasn't able to make episodes about it. And we're going to cover it all in this one, hopefully. Each of these stories are really stories that the mainstream media has tried to, is going to try, and is currently trying to distort and spin and manipulate just to push their political agenda. But here, I'm trying to give you just the straight truth and straight commentary about what's going on, why it's going on, what needs to be fixed, etc., etc., etc. We're going to discuss the horrific terrorist attack at Bondi Beach in Australia, the ongoing manhunt after the Brown University shooting, which they still haven't got anybody from it, which is crazy. But we're going to talk about all that. And then, of course, the relevant problem, which is the connection between border security and public safety. The Brown University shooting and the Australia shooting are not isolated incidents, even if they're thousands of miles apart. They are symptoms of a much, much deeper sickness that it has affected and is currently affecting Western civilization. Before we dive in, let me say this. We all need to be praying for the families of the victims, to the parents who lost children, to the children who lost parents, to the communities that are just totally broken and messed up. And here in the States and over in Australia. And if you're listening to this, America stands with you. Tons of people are praying for you. Tons of people are heartbroken for what you're going through, and we stand with you. That's what I want to say. We stand with you. So that being said, let's talk about what happened in Australia and here, and what this means for America and what this means for gun control and immigration and other important topics. Let's go. On Saturday, December 14th, families gathered at Bondi Beach, one of the most famous beaches in the world in Sydney, Australia, to celebrate Hanukkah. Over 1,000 people. On Saturday, December 14th, families gathered at Bondi Beach in Sydney, Australia, one of the most iconic and famous beaches in the world, to celebrate Hanukkah. Over 1,000 people, including a ton of children, came together for what should have been a joyful evening of community and worship and celebration of the Jewish faith. Hanukkah is the festival of lights, and it celebrates religious freedom and the triumph of light over darkness. But instead, darkness descended in the worst possible way. Two gunmen, a father and a son, ages 50 and 24, opened fire on the crowd at the beach. 15 innocent people were murdered, including a 10-year-old child named Matilda. 15 souls were extinguished. 40 others were wounded. This is a very, very high death count, very, very high injured count. And authorities found homemade bombs in the attackers' vehicle, so they were planning to go even further. Australian officials have declared this, and let me just stop before I even say this and ask you, this is a terrorist attack on a Western nation. Who do you think did it? Yeah, I think we all know who did it. The Australian officials unnecessarily have declared this an Islamic State-linked terrorist attack motivated by anti-Semitism. They found ISIS flags in the suspect's car. Both of the suspects, as far as we know, were Muslims. They weren't random shooters. They were radicalized terrorists that were targeting Jewish families just trying to mind their own business and celebrate their faith. And here's what should alarm every freedom-loving person. The older gunman, his name was Sahid Akram. He was a licensed firearms holder in Australia, and he obtained his gun license legally in 2023. He was a member of a gun club, and he passed their background checks. Okay, there is so much to talk about here. I want to start with gun control. I did write an article on this. It was kind of partially written. I didn't include a actual solution for gun control. I was just trying to demonstrate that gun control per se does not work, and it's absolutely useless and it should be done away with. There will be a link to that down in the description if you want to check it out. Here I am going to talk more about what the actual solution is to gun violence around the world. Australia has some of the strictest gun control laws in the world, not in the nation. After the Port Arthur massacre in 1996, they essentially banned most firearms. They implemented mandatory buybacks, and they created layers upon layers of regulations. The left loves to point to Australia as this safe haven and this glorious utopia, and their model for gun control. So how does this happen? How did this massacre happen? Evil doesn't follow laws. A terrorist who is determined to commit mass murder will find a way to do so. Saeed Akram followed their process, he got his license, and then he used those legally obtained firearms to commit an act of terror. The gun control didn't stop him. All gun control did was disarm the victims, the good people on the scene who were there the second it started going down and had the ability to stop it. The only thing gun control did in this situation was kill those victims and render them completely defenseless. You know what made the difference? That prevented more people from being killed? A good guy who was willing to fight back despite not being armed. Ahmed Al-Ahmed, a 43-year-old store owner and bystander, wrestled one of the guns away from an attacker. He was shot multiple times in the shoulder for his heroism. He's been called the Bondi hero, and rightly so. This man risked his life. The video is insane. I'm going to play it in just a second, but he runs up to an attacker and just tackles him. This guy literally has a long gun. It's nuts. But he runs up to him, wrestles him with his bare hands, and gets the gun away. This man, he saved lives by confronting evil directly. That's the lesson here. The only thing that stops a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun, or in this case, the courage to confront evil even when unarmed. What do you think would have happened if this guy had been able to actually use a gun? He wasn't able to use a gun. He wasn't armed because Australia, again, has some of the strictest gun control laws in the world. But what would have happened if he had been armed? He would have been able to do a lot more and stop these people. Real quick, here's the video of Ahmed Al-Ahmed.
Al-Ahmed, he's a 43-year-old married father of two, and he raced in to help. We understand, apparently owns a fruit shop in Sutherland. No experience with guns. He was just walking past. We are told that he has 2 bullets.
Now, of course, the response from the Australian government, which is very far left, is just priceless, absolutely priceless. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese is already calling for even stricter gun laws. They want to limit the number of guns someone can own, restrict types of firearms, and possibly require Australian citizenship for gun ownership. Here's the video of him saying this right here.
Nationwide resolve.
I'm determined to bring in the toughest gun laws in Australia.
The very nature of our gun laws means that they are only as strong as the weakest link.
States to work with the Commonwealth to fast-track the National Firearms Register and limit the number of firearms a person can hold. Other options include tightening licences and the types of guns that are legal, and considering allowing criminal intelligence to be used in vetting.
If we can craft a law that the police commissioner can say, I've got concerns about this person, I don't want them having access to a gun, notwithstanding the fact that they don't have a criminal record.
Chris Minns ready to recall his parliament before Christmas.
I don't want to speak for the coalition, but I think we'll be in a position to do this together.
Folks, listen, the right is not perfect, okay? The right has their own problems. We truly do. But this is what the left does every single time. They exploit tragedy. 15 people died in that. 40 people were wounded. More are probably going to die. Ahmed Al-Ahmed almost died. He was shot in the arm multiple times. He could have very easily, 6 inches to the left, and it would have been his heart. So many people died in this. This is a horrific tragedy. The left, every single time, they exploit these tragedies to advance their agenda of disarming law-abiding citizens, while the real problem, which is radical Islamic terrorism and completely uncontrolled immigration into Australia, gets soft-pedaled and ignored. Let me be clear. This attack has nothing to do with guns. To think for a second that gun legislation is an appropriate response to this horrific act of violence it displays a level of immaturity and incompetence in Australia's leaders that is completely unacceptable and like unbearable. And I'm an American. I don't even live in Australia, and I can barely take it. This attack was, it wasn't about guns. It was about ideology. These terrorists had traveled to the Philippines. They're both Muslims. They had traveled to the Philippines, specifically to Mindanao, which is an area known for ISIS militant activity. In the month before the attack, they spent a month there, rarely leaving their hotel. What were they doing? The investigation is ongoing, but we can obviously connect the dots. This was planned, coordinated anti-Semitic terrorism, inspired by a murderous ideology that seeks to destroy Western civilization and eliminate the Jewish people. No gun law would have prevented it. Now, what is the actual crucial issue here? It's immigration. The issue is immigration. The gun didn't commit the crime. The gun was just used to commit the crime. The person who committed the crime was a radical Muslim who hated the Jews and wanted to do something about it. Which, you can understand. It's if they hate the Jews, they hate the Jews. You can't really change their mind. I'm not blaming them for hating that. Obviously they shouldn't hate the Jews. That's wrong. But if they hate the Jews, they hate the Jews. You can't do anything about that. You can't change their mind. And you certainly cannot take the guns away, because if you take the guns away, the good guys have no way to stop them. But what you can do is stop them from ever coming in the country. Stop the bad guys from ever coming in the country. And you won't have a problem. Let them go to the Middle East. Let them do what they want there. And of course, get involved if you have to, but let them do what they want there. Just don't let them in your country. This is not difficult. This is not hard. We want less criminals in our country, not more. But Australia can't understand that because their leaders are ridiculously incompetent. So incompetent, it's laughable. The mainstream media, they desperately want to avoid this issue. Anthony Albanese desperately wants to avoid this issue. The real problem, again, it's just immigration and it's border security. Sahid Akram, the older shooter, he arrived in Australia in 1998 on a student visa. He transferred to a partner visa it was 2001, I believe. He remained in the country on a resident return visa. His son, Naveed, was born in Australia and because of birthright citizenship, is an Australian citizen. The attacker, he originally came from Hyderabad, India. He traveled on an Indian passport and he'd been in Australia for 27 years by the time this happened. Here's the uncomfortable truth that the left doesn't want to discuss, but that needs to be discussed if Western civilization is going to survive. Importing people from countries with radical Islamic ideology that hate you creates risk. I know this is a revolutionary idea. I know this is a concept that's like insanely hard to grasp. When you import people into your country that hate you, you're going to have a problem. I know that's crazy. I know it's hard to understand, but this is how the world works. We want less people that are radically opposed to our values and our way of life in our country. Multiculturalism is not, it doesn't work. Multiculturalism does not work. It works if you have a bunch of cultures that are very similar to each other and you bring them all into one place and you get them to work together and it's full of a bunch of mature adults who can handle themselves. But in general, it doesn't work because the world is filled with a bunch of cultures that stand in radical opposition to each other. And some of them hate each other. It's no secret that Islam hates the West. Radical Islam, they would kill us if they got the chance. And they would subjugate all of us to worshiping Allah or whatever their idea is. That's they want to do a jihad. They want to take over the world. I'm not blaming them for that. It's just an ideology. They can believe whatever they want. But if they believe that, they need to stay out of our country because the second they come in, they're going to create a massive, massive security issue. Should be the most obvious thing on the face of the planet. If a 16-year-old can see that, Anthony Albanese can see that. The leaders in our country who want to just open the floodgates and let everyone in, including all these radical Islamic militants, they should be able to see that, and they can see it. They're just refusing to. And Keir Starmer, who has ruined Great Britain. Ruined Great Britain, once one of the greatest countries the world has ever seen. He has ruined it. And former prime ministers, it's not just him, but he's, an easy target because he's in right now. They have ruined Great Britain by allowing just completely uncontrolled immigration into the country. And that pretty much goes for the rest of Europe. There are some exceptions, Hungary, Germany, etc. But for the most part, everything is just pure chaos. And it's because of this uncontrolled immigration. You cannot bring people in, import people who hate you, because they're going to try to kill you. This is not a mystery. This is not hard. Again, if a 16-year-old can figure it out, Anthony Albanese can figure it out. Of course, to be entirely clear, not every immigrant is a terrorist. There are a lot of immigrants who are just seeking a better life. I would assume that the majority of immigrants are people who are fine, just minding their own business. They want to just be here and seek a better life. There's nothing wrong with that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But if you want to come here, you have to do it the legal way. You got to be vetted. You got to get, all your stuff in order, and you got to just come on over the border by going through checkpoints and applying for all the things you need to apply for. You can't just come right in. We cannot afford for you to come right in. I would love to be able to welcome everyone in the world in. If that was possible, I would do it in a heartbeat. And if I was in control of it, I'd do it in a heartbeat. But it's not possible because there are very bad people in the world, and we have to protect our citizens. So again, not everyone who comes from even regions with a ton of terrorists in them is a terrorist, but a lot are. And a lot of them are bringing, again, worldviews that are fundamentally incompatible with Western values of freedom, tolerance, and religious liberty. And those are not values we are willing to surrender or give up. We will die before we surrender those values. That's the attitude that started the greatest nation the world has ever seen, which is America. So what are we going to do about it? Are we going to just proceed to let them on in? No, that's going to ruin everything. It's going to ruin everything, and it's going to bring our country down. The people that are in our country are deciding the future of our country. And if you fill the country with radical Islamic militants who hate us, the country doesn't have long to live. The end is in sight. And when we refuse to properly vet all these immigrants that are coming over with terrorists among them, when we throw open our borders, again, in the name of diversity and multiculturalism, we are importing tons of dangerous people. Australian intelligence officials, actually, this is hilarious, they confirmed that one of the offenders was known to them. The Prime Minister revealed that the younger attacker, Naveed, had been investigated 6 months prior for potential extremist associations. Again, they knew about him, they watched him, and somehow this still happened. This is not just an Australian problem. I've been using, the terms us, and I've been talking about my country, and I've been talking about Europe, because this is not just limited to Australia. This is an American problem. This is a European problem. This is a Western problem. Here in the United States, we have the same naive approach to immigration. Okay, there's a temporary lull in that naive approach because the Trump administration is in power and they are closing the border and going, searching for illegal immigrants and deporting them. But the Biden administration and, whatever's left of their policies that still survived the Trump administration opened our southern border to millions of unvetted individuals, including tens of millions of fighting age males from China who had no reason to be here, who had a fine life back in China. There's some very suspicious stuff related to that. Really, really crazy, insane, scary stuff about all these fighting age males that came over the border. And then, of course, all these Islamic terrorists from other countries, primarily the Middle East and India. And we have no idea who, these people are. Literally just no idea. And they're just here in the country. We don't know where they came from. We don't know what they believe. That's very, very dangerous. And it's not just about people like crossing the Rio Grande. We issue visas to individuals from countries that constantly harbor terrorists, countries where anti-American and anti-Semitic ideology is not only mainstream, the government participates in it just 24/7. We do it in the name of being welcoming and being compassionate. Being welcoming and being compassionate in this sense is going to end us. This cannot continue. What about, I hear so many people say, I'm not kidding, I hear so many people say that if you think the border should be closed, if you think I should go house to house to arrest illegal immigrants and find them and deport them, you're just a mean, nasty, hateful person. You have no compassion. You don't want to protect anybody. You don't want to help anybody. Well, that's wrong, because I'm one of those people. And I would answer with a question: what about compassion for American citizens? What about protecting our own communities? The Bible is very clear, on another note, about the role of government. Romans 13 tells us that the governing authorities are established by God to do two things: punish wrongdoers and protect the innocent. That's it. A government that fails to secure its borders and screen who enters it is failing in its most basic responsibility. Proverbs 25:26 says, quote, "Like a muddled spring or a polluted well is a righteous person who gives way to the wicked." When we allow dangerous ideologies and dangerous individuals into our countries without the proper scrutiny, we muddy the well and we endanger everyone. I'm not saying we should close all immigration. America is a nation of immigrants. It's always been a nation of immigrants. Legal immigration has been a tremendous blessing, but it needs to be controlled. It needs to be selective, and we must prioritize the safety of current American citizens who the government owes protection and security over the feelings of those who want to lecture us about xenophobia. The left calls this fear-mongering. They say we're discriminating. They trot out their favorite insults: racist, bigot, Islamophobe, in that order. But warning to protect your family, warning to protect the country that you swore to protect and the people inside of it, isn't bigotry. I don't know what is, but that's not bigotry. Wanting to know who's entering your country isn't racism. It's common sense, it's prudence, and it is the duty of every government, no matter where you are, America, Europe, Australia, etc. So that's all I'm saying. Hopefully you can see how insane Australia's immigration policies are, and how these immigration policies literally directly resulted in the death of those 15 people and the 40 that are wounded, including children. But on another note, I want to turn to the tragedy at Brown University in Providence, Rhode Island. On Friday, December 13th, just one day before the Bondi Beach attack, a gunman entered Brown University's Barris and Hawley engineering building during finals week. Students were gathered in room 166 for an economics exam review session as the school year comes to a close. The gunman opened fire, killing 2 students and wounding 9 others. The victims who died were Ella Cook, a 19-year-old sophomore and vice president of the Brown College Republicans, and Muhammad Aziz Umarzukov, I believe that's how you pronounce that, who was an 18-year-old Uzbek American who had dreams of becoming a neurosurgeon. Ella was described as a, quote, devoted Christian and committed conservative who represented the very best of Alabama, end quote. Muhammad Aziz was remembered as, quote, incredibly kind, funny, and smart, with big dreams of helping people, end quote. 2 brilliant young lives cut short by absolutely senseless violence. As I record this, it is Thursday, December 18th. It is 12:04 p.m. on the West Coast. The shooter remains at large. There's an active manhunt. It's involving the FBI, the local police, and the state authorities. They have released surveillance footage showing a masked individual fleeing the scene, and that's it. A person of interest was briefly initially detained, a young man. I saw his photo on CNN, but he ended up being later released when evidence pointed elsewhere. For 6 days now, this killer has been 100% on the loose. The police have no idea who he is or who she is and where they are. Students are terrified. The campus is on edge. They're wondering if he's going to come back and do it again. And what's the response from our political leaders? The same tired refrain that we just heard in Australia: more gun control. Rhode Island Governor Dan McKee, fine specimen of governor, called for a review of safety and security plans for schools. That's fine. That's totally fine. That's totally legitimate. That's totally justified. I believe every school should be doing that constantly to try to prevent these sorts of incidents. But let me ask you this. What stops a determined killer? Gun-free zones? Brown University is a gun-free zone. That didn't stop the shooter. Background checks? Well, we don't know yet how the shooter obtained his weapon, but I can guarantee you this. No background check law stops someone determined to commit murder. Criminals do not follow laws. The left's answer is always the same, which is to restrict the rights of law-abiding citizens to keep and bear arms while doing nothing to address the root cause of violence, which is, first off, stemming from a broken justice system and a broken prison system that doesn't actually punish anybody for their crimes, just rehabilitates them, whatever the heck that means. And then, of course, sin and the depravity of human nature that comes from being in a fallen world. And then bringing, our society supposedly into the light from the Enlightenment on into an atheistic frame of mind, a nihilistic frame of mind where nothing matters and everything has no purpose and no meaning, which of course leads to people doing things like shooting at Brown University. If we had remained in the Christian light and warmth and love that the Western world, experienced for 1,000 years before the Enlightenment, and is still experiencing the remnants of, we wouldn't have this kind of just constant, senseless violence. But they refuse to address any of that. Here's what would actually help. Let me tell you what would actually help schools and what would actually help, everyone else. We need armed security on campus. They need to be everywhere. Armed security. They need to allow trained, licensed individuals to carry concealed weapons. So I believe the licensing process should be very easy. It should be very fast. Obviously the training needs to be there, but it needs to be short and sweet, needs to be simple, and it needs to be very, very easy to get a weapon. If all the students in that economics room had been carrying a weapon, if one of them had been carrying a gun, he probably would not have made it out the door. And it's very possible that those 2 students who died would still be alive today, but none of the students are allowed to carry guns. So we need, armed security everywhere on campuses across the nation. They need tons of students to be armed, tons of teachers to be armed, and to have the ability to repel a direct tactical attack. And they need to harden the schools. So there's a difference between a soft target and a hard target. A soft target is a place where you're going to meet like no resistance. There's going to be no one's going to put up resistance if you go in there and start shooting, because no one's armed. Nobody has any idea what they're doing. Everything's crazy. It's a ice cream shop maybe is a soft target. A hard target would be somewhere like a police station. And this is where mass shooters don't attack. Have you ever noticed mass shooters never go to gun ranges, police stations, military bases? There is the occasional, mass shooter on a military base, but that's far rarer. The reason, and this is interesting, get this. If guns are the problem, then why do mass shooters never go to the places with the most guns? And why do they never come from the places with the most guns? Because guns aren't the problem. The problem is a soft versus a hard target. Mass shooters never go to the places with the most guns because they know there are good guys there who will use the guns and will use lethal force to stop them if they try. They go to the soft targets where no one is armed. That's why every teacher in America needs to have a gun immediately. That would solve the school shooting problem overnight. I promise you, we would have little to no school shootings ever again if every teacher in America was required to be trained in and carry a gun, and the shooter knew that if they walk in there would be 50 teachers waiting for them, and every single one of them would be armed and authorized to use lethal force. That's how it needs to be. We need to make our schools a hard target. Jesus himself told his disciples in Luke 22:36, if you don't have a sword, sell your cloak and buy one. And that's for all Christians out there who think we don't need to, defend ourselves. We shouldn't defend ourselves, and we don't need to buy guns. We don't need guns. Jesus literally told them to get swords and defend themselves. In modern terms, that means being prepared to defend yourself and others. That's a biblical mandate for doing so. It means not being a helpless victim. The Second Amendment exists for a reason. Our founders understood that the right to keep and bear arms is the foundation to every other right, and that an armed populace is a free populace, and the right to self-defense is God-given and fundamental to a free society. But the left wants us completely defenseless. They want us dependent on the government for protection because it gives them more power. And when the government fails, as it did on Brown University, as it did on Bondi Beach, and as it will continue to do in every single instance, because the government is always reactive, it's always responding. They're never there right when things start to go down, and thus they're always at a massive disadvantage. When all that happens, they want us, the citizens who are there, who are about to suffer the gunman opening fire on us or whatever else is going on. They want us to have no recourse. Folks, that's not freedom. That is tyranny. It's dressed up as safety. Folks, that is not freedom. That is tyranny dressed up as safety for our society. Now, I've mentioned several of the causes for this in passing, which is primarily letting a bunch of people in your country who hate you and don't like your ideology. For the Australia one, at least, the Brown University thing is gun control laws, which make it impossible for good people to defend themselves when they need to. That made all these shootings possible. And of course, we don't know who the Brown University shooter is yet. So that they also may be some sort of a Muslim or radical Islamist or just otherwise radical terrorist who hates America. But there is something much deeper going on here. And of course, this is a cultural podcast and this is a Christian podcast. So I'm here to remind you that these are not just political battles and political issues. These are spiritual battles. That's it. They're literally just spiritual battles. Ephesians 6:12 reminds us, quote, "For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers over this present darkness, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places," end quote. The attack at Bondi Beach was an attack on Jewish people celebrating their faith. It was anti-Semitism motivated by demonic ideology. The enemy, Satan himself, hates God's chosen people, and he's going to use any tool to destroy them. Now, to be clear, I'm a Christian. I don't believe Israel is God's chosen people anymore. I believe the church is now God's chosen people. But Israel was God's people. And, you see the connection. Obviously, the Jews are connected with the God of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, which is the God that we Christians serve. That's why Muslims and all of, radical Islam hates us so much. Christians, we're always the ones getting persecuted, like what's going on right now over in Nigeria. The terrible, terrible stuff going on over there. And of course, they hate the Jews because the Jews worship the same God we do. We just add in, of course, that Jesus is the Son of God and he came down. And the Jews don't believe that. But it's an attack on God. It's an attack on Yahweh. The attack at Brown University targeted young people who are just pursuing education, trying to, follow the American dream, the American way of life, including a committed Christian conservative, as far as I can tell. Evil seeks to destroy the future. Evil seeks to steal hope, and evil seeks to spread fear. Our response cannot just be political or legislative. Yes, we need strong borders. Yes, we need to protect our Second Amendment rights. Yes, we need to allow police to do their jobs. But we also need spiritual renewal. We need to recognize that we are in a battle between light and darkness that has been going on in this nation for a very long time, ever since we started to waver in our commitment to Christian ideology and to Christian laws and to Christian faith. We need to pray for our nation. We need to pray for our leaders. And we need to pray for protection against those who will do us harm. And we need to pray that America as a nation would repent. Okay, we are an increasingly more wicked and an increasingly more evil nation, and it's got to stop. God will not put up with our just insanity, with all of our LGBTQ stuff, with abortion, with the constant senseless violence, and the total disregard of Him. He is not going to put up with that. He will eventually punish us. So we need to pray that our nation will repent. We need churches that are bold in proclaiming truth rather than just cowering before political correctness, which is a lot of mainline evangelicalism. We need Christians who are willing to stand firm in their faith even when the world mocks them. And we need to remember that while governments have a role in maintaining order and punishing evil, our ultimate hope is not in political solutions, because political solutions are ultimately, they're going to fail. No political solution on earth is going to work. Jesus Christ is going to work. Jesus Christ is going to save our nation if that's His will, if that's what's going to happen. If our nation is going to be saved, only Jesus can do it. Only Christianity can do it. We need to transform hearts, and we need to offer redemption, even to the worst sinners, even to people like the murderers at Bondi Beach, and the murderer at Brown University, and people like Tyler Robinson, who murdered Charlie Kirk, and Thomas Matthew Crooks, who's of course dead. He didn't make it, make it out of that situation. But we need to offer redemption to these people. We need to offer forgiveness. And we need to understand that, of course, there's these immediate political issues that we can talk about. But the final and most ultimate issue is that our nation has ceased to worship Jesus Christ and ceased being a Christian nation, and in doing so has endangered itself beyond its wildest dreams. So where does this leave us? The Bondi Beach terrorist attack shows us that gun control doesn't stop terrorism. It just disarms the innocent. The Brown University shooting shows us that evil exists and soft targets remain vulnerable, and again, that gun control doesn't work. Both of these tragedies highlight the vital importance, if we are to survive as a nation, the vital importance of controlled immigration and proper vetting for people who come in the country. The left is going to use both of these events to push their agenda. They're going to want more gun restrictions, more open borders, and more political correctness that really just prevents honest discussion about radical ideology. But we will not be silenced. We will speak the truth, and we will do so in love. We will defend our constitutional rights. We're not giving an inch. Charlie Kirk died just a couple months ago doing this very thing, and we're going to carry that legacy on. And we are going to demand that our government will protect us, their citizens, which is their duty to do first and foremost. And we'll pray. We will pray for the victims and their families. We will pray for justice, and we will pray for our nation to return to the values that once made us great, which was faith in the Christian God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Not faith as a general term. Faith in the Christian God, freedom, and responsibility. Thank you for joining me today on the Carson Wagner Show. Stay vigilant, stay informed, and remember, the truth will set you free. As always, I'm Carson Wagner. If you like what you hear, if you like this episode, please consider subscribing, turning on notifications, liking this video, leaving a comment if you have anything at all you want to talk about. I'd love to talk about it. You can also email me at thecarsonwagnershow@gmail.com with questions, comments, criticisms, new episode suggestions, whatever it may be, and I'd be happy to get those from you. Alternatively, if you want to subscribe and get an email every time I release a new episode, you can go to thecarsonwagnershow.substack.com and subscribe there. There will also be a link to my blog down in the description, and that blog post that I mentioned earlier that you can check out and go subscribe there. It's called The Compass as well. So yeah, I believe that's everything. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next time on The Carson Wagner Show.